Yeah. Okay, we go. Everything's rolling, everything's cool. Go.
Say South African identity.
I think the South African identity is people that are where they come from, their heritage. If you why doesn't matter, but also embrace the diversity. Don't believe your culture or your language is dominant over other cultures and dominant. I think because diverse country, South African identity, somebody being proud in embracing diversity.
Now, who would you say is more South African than others?
I think people that more than others are those people that's proud. First and foremost, no matter what color you are. Say, with South Africa, with our exceptional ability, all, I love this country and I will contribute to building this. That is the people that's more South African. The people just floating and don't this country.
Okay, now, which language would you say represents SA?
It's a very interesting question. I would say I think there's a language that you see in our young generation where they mix Afrikaans and English and words and they greet each other and say guitar and nose lacquer and things like that. Just speak different all the languages. I think that is your African language that's developing. And I would think in a few years' time, we are older people would start speaking the South African language.
Why are you answering the question? Oh, exactly that. I was going to answer that. Okay, I'm not doing this anymore. Okay, now, which language should be taught?
Yes, no, for fuck's sake. You're not doing it that way. Okay?
Which language should be taught in schools?
Okay, let's be practical about it. I would say it should be multilingual. with English being at least one of the languages. The first and foremost, English is an international language. If you want to communicate to people outside South Africa, then you have to go speak English. So I would say English is one of them, and then one of the South African vernaculars. In other words, you can choose between Afrikaans, Xhosa, isiZulu, whatever you want to speak. I would say between one vernacular and then English.
All right. Now, what makes other languages unacceptable as South African languages?
I think any language that tries to dominate some other language, or other culture trying to dominate some other culture. In other words, you'll get somebody, it's a personal language. I wouldn't say language per se like Afrikaans is language, but you can get Afrikaans people in their language. You can see they discriminate, they're sexist, they're racist, and I would say that is unacceptable. But then you get Afrikaans people who's really not that. It's really trying to embrace, trying to accommodate, trying to be truly South African. And I would say the other language that really tries to look down on other people, that is unacceptable in South Africa.
All right. Now, would you say that people who refuse to learn other languages have the right to refuse to learn?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I would say, as a true liberalist, I would say yes. They have the right to speak whatever language they want, and if they don't want to learn other languages, then it's up to them. But I would think in a truly South African context, if you're gonna just cling on to your one language, then soon you'll find that you're outdated, you can't understand other people can't understand you, and you'll just feel out of the whole picture. So I would say yes, they do have the right, but will that benefit them? I don't think so. I think it's more beneficial to be multilingual in South Africa today.
Would you say that culture breeds language or language breeds culture?
Okay, well, language breeds culture or culture breeds language. I would say it's so interlinked. You grow up when you're born. I think it's a nature versus nurture thing that you get in psychology. You grow up and then your parents teach you this, and this is where you come from. Your great-grandfather came with a ship to this country and he had a long beard and stuff like that. And we're speaking Afrikaans, and this is where we come from, and yes, our culture made some mistakes, and this is what we try to do. But I think it's so intertwined. When you think of Afrikaans, then you think of a certain culture. When you think of a certain culture in Afrikaans, and you think of the language, it's so intertwined. In other words, to answer your question, I would rather say both of them feed on each other. In other words, culture feed on language, and language feed on culture.
Okay, now we move into culture. All right, now, which culture best represents South Africa?
Once again, like I said with the language, I think it's your truly cosmopolitan culture. There's a culture developing. In South Africa, you really get, because you got 11 languages, you get different cultures, different ethnic groups. You get white people as Afrikaans, English, people from overseas, from Europe, from America, that's just what. Then you get black people in South Africa, some of them come from Zimbabwe, Mozambique as well. So it's a total mixture of cultures. I think a truly South African culture is that cosmopolitan culture, which you can wear Western clothes, come to a township and chill with your black friends. I think that is the type of culture developing and that we should embrace and should encourage.
Now, would you say South Africans have lost their identity to the West?
No, I would say South Africa is busy developing their own identity. To develop identity, this is what happens. South Africa is 10, 11, 12 years in democracy. I mean, we're still finding our feet. We're just a baby in the international world. So I think what we are trying to do, all of us, is to borrow a bit from the West. See, because we've got Western culture. I mean, you've got your white people that came from Europe. So you do have Western culture. You do have South African culture, but you also do have sub-Saharan culture for everybody coming in. I think we're finding our feet. We're seeing what of the West can we embrace and what should we discard. Same thing with African. What type of African traditions and so forth, like Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an amazing thing that we should embrace, but there's maybe some other things in African culture that we would rather say we want to discard that because we want to be one of the best for our children, for our people that's following us. So I would say no, we haven't lost against the West. I think we're embracing the best part of it.
Now, what would you say is the point of learning other people's cultures? Why do I have to learn about your culture and you have to learn about my culture? What's the point, really?
On a personal note, I would say to learn some other people's cultures, it enriches your life, it broadens your perspectives. You just get more world-wise. I think if you compare to a lot of people always talk about Americans and say that they quite closed-minded. I think it's because there's only one culture there and they feel their culture is 100% right and they don't have a broad vision. But South Africans are much more world-wise because we know other people think differently than us and we embrace that. That's why it's important to learn other cultures. It's just to broaden your horizons, to understand what the world out there look like. And not just live in your own corner with your own little candle in the dark and stuff like that. I think it enlightens you.
Now I'm going to sound like I'm repeating your answers.
Okay.
What would you say is the culture of colored people? Brainers.
Yeah, okay. Accepting supporting Western Province rugby and eating samosas the whole time. I can't talk on behalf of them. I can't say what is their culture at all. So sorry, I can't answer that thing. It's
Right. Now, so all this whole discussion about like different cultures and stuff, what do you say is the South African culture? You know, what is it? We can clearly say, you know, when you're in the States or wherever you are, you can say, that's a South African. I can see from the way they live and their culture or whatever. This is a South African culture.
South Africans are much more colourful. I think it's because of the whole diversity thing. We're much more colourful. You can sort of see that this is a South African person when you're overseas. It's like they're very colourful and they're very friendly. So I would say a South African culture is an open culture. They're open to other experiences, open to your worldview, open to your ideologies, open to your religion, and it's a very embracive culture. It's to say, well, I'll embrace life. I'm Afrikaans, I'm white, you black, but let's embrace each other. Let's embrace our culture, and I think that is a true South African culture coming through, embracing life, celebrating diversity, celebrating humankind.
Fantastic. Okay, now we come to the mullah.
Yeah, show me the money.
So now, what did you say South African, what does South African money, what does money say about the South African identity? But does it have to do with South African money?
The currency,
One of the fuel
Yeah.
Okay, no, I've got it.
Yeah. So what did you say South African money actually says about South Africans?
Yes, the texture and the colors and everything of our money actually drastically changed over the past 10 years. We came from a totally European look, where you got your fathers on the, like Jan van Riebeeck on the front and stuff like that, to like this one, like in the olden days. Oh my word, can you actually believe we used this? To die goeie ou dae. Till today, I mean, if you look at your banknotes today, they've got on the back, they've got mines on it and animals on it, and also different types of things. I think, and it looks good. I mean, if you compare it to other currencies, like let's say for instance the euro or the dollar. I mean, the dollar is green. It doesn't matter if it's $1, $100 note is green. Well, us, we've got different colors, different textures, different sizes. I just think it resembles the new South Africa. I think the old banknotes showed you the old South Africa, while the new banknotes really showed us how the new South Africa really looks like. I think there's one. That's 10. Like I said, this is the 10 rand note. I was very indigenous about how animals look like. On the back, it's got very nice texture, very nice size and everything. I would really say the new banknotes just resembles the new South Africa quite brilliantly.
Right. All right. Now marriage.
Oh my word. Oh, that's a good thing.
About marriage. Okay. Now, would you say that intercultural or interracial marriages work in South Africa?
to be very honest, it all depends on your context. In your rural areas, I don't think interracial marriages will work. In other words, if you go into your rural black areas, I don't think, I think that people would really struggle to accept black-white marriage. And I would say the same thing if in your traditional Afrikaans suburbs as well. People will still struggle to accept a interracial marriage. But I think in your cosmopolitan, let's say in Johannesburg per se, I think people there are much more chilled about these type of things. They understand that marriage is not about color. It's about love. It's about respect. It's about supporting each other. And I think that is why we understand that you can move past it. If you meet your soulmate, and that person happens to be another color, it doesn't matter anymore in certain areas in South Africa. But unfortunately, I would really say in certain areas in South Africa, the people are still very close-minded. I will not accept something like that. And maybe those people even be open for discrimination and stuff like that. But we need to encourage more the embracement of interracial marriages.
Now, would you say that an offspring or a child of two people from racial background, would you say that that child has more of a chance of eradicating the whole racial crisis than someone who's born, with two black or two white parents?
Okay. To ask me something like that, it's almost to ask that, will the child of two sober people eradicate the drug problem? I don't think that that having children from interracial marriages will per se eradicate the racial problem. I don't think that's the racial problem lies with blacks and whites. It lies with people not understanding each other. It doesn't lie with children of the offspring of maybe interracial marriages. I think black people and white people need to come together, talk about the hot things. I mean, it's easy to tolerate each other and then sit down and say, okay, well, I have black friends, I have white friends and stuff like that. But you don't talk to each other. You don't say, listen here, but yesterday my mother was hijacked by a black person. Or you can say, well, my father was beaten by white people when he was younger. And just talk about those things that really are the hot topics and try to understand each other's where we come from. I think that will eradicate the racial problem, not necessarily offspring of interracial marriages.
All right. Now, wouldn't you say that the fact that we have interracial marriages, wouldn't that impact on our cultural identity negatively? Now, because if I'm marrying you to some degree, then I'm losing a bit of my culture and you're losing a bit of your culture and then producing this whole new culture. But then are we not losing our heritage, our culture in that process?
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to use your own words to say that at the end of the day, you're producing a new culture. And like I said earlier, South Africans, we are busy creating our own culture. And yes, it's not necessarily that you lose heritage. I mean, let's say, for instance, there's a black and a white marriage and now there's a offspring is born. I mean, that person is actually in a very privileged position to carry the heritage of black people, knowing exactly where they come from and how they struggled, but also getting the heritage of the white people. In other words, although you create a new culture, you're not necessarily losing something. I don't think culture is a zero-sum game, where when one culture wins, the other one has to lose. I think it's a positive-sum game where two cultures come together. Although they produce a mixture, they don't necessarily lose the heritage where they come from. They carry that heritage together, and they just produce something. Can I call it better? Maybe they can produce something better in between all of these.
All right. Now, would you say that intercultural marriage is rare? Let's say you're white and English, and then you marry a white and Afrikaans bro. No gaan dat werk.
I can't speak on behalf of black people to say, well, a heritage cultural Xhosa really get along with a heritage cultural Sotho or Zulu. I can't talk of that. But what I can talk out of experience out of being white is that for a long time now, I think inter-ethnic marriages like English people, Afrikaans people, it has been happening for years now. And I think where it was frowned upon maybe in the 1950s or 60s in the heyday of Afrikaans culture, because they thought they were the dominant culture and looked down on every other culture. Well, today I don't think it's not like that. I've got a lot of Afrikaans people with English girlfriends, a lot of English girlfriends, Afrikaans boyfriends. It happens, and I think people accept it a bit more than they did. Of course, you get people that don't accept it, but that's their liberal own choice. If they don't want to, it's fine. But I think it can work. It's proved to work over the past 40, 50, 60 years in South Africa. And if that worked, then I can't see why it won't work in the future.
Alright. But then, in that same breath, now, what about cultural differences? Because as much as we might both be black, the point is I come from Ndebele culture and you come from a Sothu culture. Especially if we're really, really brought up by cultural parents.
Yes.
You know, there will be cultural clashes where you do things differently and I do things differently.
Yes.
You know, like, but then wouldn't that affect the relationship negatively? Isn't that one of the reasons that intercultural relationships should not be encouraged because of things like that?
Okay. You squeeze a toothpaste in the middle of the tube and I squeeze a toothpaste at the end. And now we marry and now I'm very angry at you because you squeeze it in the middle. I think it's the same thing with cultural differences. We grow up with different types of things, and at some time the people love each other. They have to compromise and say, okay, well, let's squeeze a toothpaste in this way. It's like if you're in the belly and at the marriage you have to eat pap, and in this other culture you have to slaughter a cow. Then maybe you have to compromise between all those. Sometimes going to be tough because sometimes the lovers can compromise, but the families don't want to. But it can be difficult. But the main thing is there's so many differences when you marry that you have to compromise in some way anyway. So I don't think cultural differences is a barrier that can't be overcome. It's difficult and it can be overcome. And I want to emphasize, if it is overcome, it will contribute to the richness of the marriage.
Fantastic. Okay. Now, tolerance and forgiveness.
Yes.
Alright?
Uh,
Now, would
yeah.
you say there's tolerance between the different races in our country?
Yes, I think there is tolerance, but that's the problem. It stays with tolerance. And I don't think people are embracing diversity at the moment. They're just tolerating each other. So yes, there's tolerance, but is that a good thing? I don't think so. I think we should move past tolerance and really go to embracement of diversity.
Alright? Now, sorry, a question about what happens behind closed doors. What were you
Yeah, you know what happens behind closed doors, baby. Yeah.
Who's your daddy now? Bring the leather out.
When you're students and you're drunk, color doesn't matter anymore.
Alright. Okay. Okay, now I think I get it. Oh,
Yeah, what
No.
happens when the people, where whites are with whites and blacks are with blacks?
exactly.
Yeah,
So
okay.
yeah, what do you say?
Yeah, what do I know happened? I mean, I'm a white guy, I've got white friends.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what happens when a similar culture comes together, then they talk about other cultures. I mean, it invariably happens. And unfortunately, sometimes you do get racial jokes happening. You get blacks talking about whites in a degrading way. You get whites talking about blacks in a degrading way. But I would really say, I think it's time that your real cosmopolitan people, when you get into a conversation like that, then you just can stand up and say, okay, well, it's easy talking about making jokes, but when it really gets nasty, you can just tell people, listen, yeah, I've got really good friends that is black. Please don't speak of blacks in that type of way. You don't know what's going on. So yes, I think sometimes people, because they're very hypocritical, they say, oh, peace and everything. When they get to university, go to black people class, tolerate them and stuff like that. But when they go back, having a braai, having some beers, oh yes, and then stuff can go really pear-shaped. And that's what we need to work on. So yes, it does happen. It does happen, I think, in every culture.
Alright. You think those people who fled the country back in the day because of your opus should be allowed back in the country? The ones who went into exile?
Yeah, it's both. It's both. Remember, I think people fled the country that time, mainly blacks, because of the white situation. And now a lot of whites fled because of the black situation. I mean, white Afrikaans male, and if you go look at what people say, my prospects of really getting a job is less, let's say, as my black equivalent at the moment. And then a lot of people that's of my culture decide, oh, well, then I'm just going to leave. I'm going to go to Europe or America, make some other money. What I would say about that is that sometimes people make bad mistakes, and then they go overseas when it was not really needed. But then sometimes, like for instance, in your ancestors, I'm talking about people like Thabo Mbeki and so forth, because of the political situation, they had to flee. Because Thabo Mbeki is really very intellectual today, and he wouldn't have that intellectual capacity if he didn't went overseas to go study there. So yes, of course, I would think that people, if they go overseas and they come back, I would really think that they should be allowed to do that. Definitely, because when they come back, normally they come back culturally richer, maybe more intelligent, or maybe sometimes even more proud of South Africa when they come back and say, well, I saw the other side of the fence and it's not so green after all. So now I'm coming back and I'm really contributing to this country.
Cool. Okay. Please can answer your phone.
No, put it down. Sorry.
Okay. All right.
Right, what?
Sharp.
Is that that?
No, I mean like sharp. You ready to? roll?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, now there's a huge probability or possibility that there can be total acceptance between the different races in our country.
You can call me pessimistic. I would rather say I'm a realist. If you look at centuries now, I don't think you'll have total. I'm talking about 100% acceptance between all races. Look at the situation in DRC. I mean, there's two black ethnic groups killing each other. So in other words, I don't think that there'll be total acceptance. But what I really do believe that people like us, younger generation, need to encourage everybody to understand each other and accept each other and embrace each other's diversity and so forth. And then you'll get people that work together and you get other people that really say, okay, well, I would rather be separate from the group. So yeah, I don't think there'll be 100% acceptance, but I really think that we can get up there. In other words, I think South Africa still has a far way to go, to go where we want to be. But 100% acceptance, I don't think that will ever happen. But that's not to say that we have to give up and say it will never happen. I still think we can work towards something.
Right. Okay, last question. Now, how do you feel when someone of a different race walks into a room at your
When someone of a different race walks into the room. I had some trouble about 5 or 6 years ago when I came from the Free State. But I must say, I think living in a multicultural city like Johannesburg changed me a lot. In other words, what I'm trying to say, I'll rather get an emotional experience if a type of person walks into the room. In other words, if I know this person is racist or degrading or sexist, then I'll have an emotional experience when he walks into the room. If he's black or white, I don't think that's the problem. In other words, if a black or white walks into the room and I don't know him or her, then I don't have any, it's a person that's walking into the room. But if I start to get to know people and they're bad South Africans and they walk into the room, then I would say I've got an emotional thing about them. I don't want to sit them and I don't want to talk to them because I just think they're bad company. Which beer? It's between Castle and Amstel, definitely, my man. I love it.
Also, what makes outbreaks such
If you think he is, that is.
Yeah, no, Thabo Mbeki, I think he is doing his job quite well. The main reason for that is that South Africa can't move forward if Africa doesn't move with us. We can be the hegemon of Africa as much as we want to be, but if Zimbabwe, Mozambique, DRC, Tanzania, those type of countries don't walk with us, in other words, they also don't fight corruption and all these type of things, then Africa as a continent will never be a big voice in the global sector. So that's why I think he's a very good president, because he actually goes there, tries to help the other countries to embrace good governance. And secondly, I think with the whole Jacob Zuma thing, he shows he's got a backbone. He believes in this country and he believes that there's certain things that needs to be done. And sometimes even if he has to make hard choices then he will make it for the better of this country. And that's why I would support him definitely.
What's the greatest place in South Africa?
Okay, I would say the best place is Josie, by far, because of his cultural diversity. But I normally go to KwaZulu-Natal for holidays. So if you want to go on a holiday, I like the weather over there and so forth. So that's why I think for holidays, that's the best place to be. Okay, everybody calls me Tjokkie, but my real name is Elmen Lamprecht. It's E-L-M-E-N L-A-M-P-R-E-C-H-T. Yes, you have permission to use the footage.
What's your age?
I'm 24.
You are so young.
Oh. And you, darling, you are 22 now.
Ngifrage ukuthi yazi singatholani ishort phakathi nestrand like short yakhe nebhekani guys ngabo yisa yeah that's what I was saying it's not singathola nestrand
Jullie! Hij toch ik kom hier namelijk. Oké, niet is goed. Kijk iemand, ik ken niet hoor.
okay and action yeah
Okay. You should see Lauren. I'm on with it.
But what is she up to these days?
Listen this one. Now she was about clothes for events council. Now, instead of going like to normal place like Mr. Park or something, she likes to go to Woolworths or Edgar's. Then she buys shorts for the guys at 170 rand per short. I mean, I almost fell off my chair. Well, I saw that because now Rochelle comes to me and says, this is unacceptable, this is his compliance. She buys tight skirts for the girls, but tight for like this going here. Like tight stuff, but slutty stuff. And Rochelle refuses to pay the man. He says, I'm not paying for slutty clothes. I'm not buying slutty clothes, it's amazing.
I think let's sit here because you guys have camera equipment.
Yeah, okay.
But then, so what did she use? Did she use her own money in the first place and then we thought that Rochelle would replace it?
No, she says she's gonna buy clothes for the events council.
Okay.
So then she got to check like in advance, right? And
Yeah.
then Rochelle said, okay, well, when she bought the slips, that no, she's gonna give the money back. You're not using this money. Now, you know Rochelle can get it.
Exactly.
Oh my word. But I mean,
So now
she deserved it. Lauren deserved it, I guess.
So then what's gonna happen? Is the event council gonna have to pay for the clothes themselves, or is she gonna have to pay for it?
No, at the end of the day, I convinced
Rochelle to let it
just
slide.
let it slide and stuff like that. But it's because of that we're gonna get
Okay, my name is Asani Apani. My name is A-S-A-N-I-A. Apani, A-P-H-A-N-E. I'm 21 years of age. And I'm giving Sipiwe very Asani rights to use this interview in broadcasting or whatever medium. Yeah. Okay. Now that we got that out of the way.
What is the South African identity?
Okay. Shit is the pen. Okay. South African identity is relatively developing. So I don't think right now we have an exact thing that we can call a South African identity. But I would say what makes a a South African, the way we can identify someone as South African, it's someone who acknowledges and appreciates diversity around them. So I think for me, South African identity is about being able to be comfortable in your own skin and your own self. That it's not an issue for you to hang out or to learn about other cultures. For me, that's what South African identity is about. It's about being so aware of what's going on around you, yet not flinching when you meet someone else from another culture, when you talk to someone else, because you are so confident in who you are. So that's more or less what it's all about.
Who is more South African than others?
About being more South African. I would say anyone can be more South African than the next person, in a sense that they appreciate and embrace what is around them. As a South African in a I shouldn't use the word developing country. As a South African in a country that's adapting to changes, to things that are happening around it, you should be passionate about change, about positive transformation. You should be passionate about learning about new things, because that's what democracy is about, and we have a relatively new democracy, so we should be passionate about such things. So for me, what would make you more South African than the next person is to be aware of what's happening around you, use information, find out what's going on, learn about new things, and embrace all the other diversity that's happening around you, and find your own identity as an individual so that you can be confident enough to go and learn about other people, so that you don't have an issue with that.
Which language best represents South Africa?
Which language best represents? I would say the best language, the language that best represents South Africa is, well, there's no term for it yet, but it's mainly the language that's used in Joburg. Because Joburg is such a cosmopolitan area, we gooi this and we ish that. So it's a whole lot of things gooi, in one thing. And it's so vibey and so happening, and for me that best represents South Africa in the sense that we're a vibey country, we're a young democracy, we have a lot of people with a lot of energy and a lot of passion, and we want to do things. So for me, the language that best represents South Africa is your cosmopolitan Joburg language, because I can speak 3 languages or 4 languages simultaneously, and the next person will still get me or still understand me. And for me that's what it's about, that's what South Africa is about.
Which languages should be taught in schools?
As far as I'm concerned, all languages should be taught in schools. But then, being practical, obviously English being the global language should be taught in schools. But definitely we need to emphasize more on indigenous languages, because through language you get to learn and understand a lot more about people's cultures. You might not completely understand it, but you get to have the idea about other cultures, and that's how we can start really focusing and start appreciating indigenous knowledge through focus on indigenous languages. So definitely English should be taught in schools, but as well as Setswana, as well as isiNdebele, as well as isiZulu should be taught in schools, because that's what we're about. We're not a one medium country. We've got Indians, we've got colors, we've got all these other people, we've got these amazing cultures and languages. And the more we start teaching them, the more kids start learning about them at a younger age, the more people, when they grow up, they'll be able to appreciate them.
What makes other languages unacceptable in South Africa?
I don't know if there's any unacceptable language anywhere in the world, really. Never mind South Africa, but and for me, we've got 11 or 12 official languages, including SAID language, or maybe 13, including Sothu, Tao, and Jozi. So really, what would make one language unacceptable? It's a very fine line, and I'll get back to you. I can't think of something.
What about people who refuse to learn a language? Should they be allowed to refuse to learn?
Well, you know what? Everybody has a democratic right to agree or to disagree to something. You know what I'm saying? That's what democracy is all about. But the bottom line is, like I said, we're a developing democracy. Not necessarily developing, but an adapting country. We're learning new things, and that's why it is so important. And to a large extent, empirical, that actually people learn other languages, but then they have the choice not to. But it is through learning that people start understanding. Through understanding comes respect, and it is through respect that we'll just stop tolerating each other and actually appreciating and embracing each other as different individuals from different cultures, without forming little groups and putting people in little pigeonholes and say, but you're from this culture, therefore I should treat you this way. So it's really a matter of saying, as an individual, making a paradigm shift, saying, I want to learn something different, I want to understand more.
Which culture best represents South Africa?
I could say Ndebele, yeah, but the culture that best represents South Africa, like the language, is more of a cosmopolitan one. Yes, the cosmopolitan one might not necessarily have the rural aspect to it, but let's remember that the cosmopolitan culture is made of people from different backgrounds. So half of them are from rural areas, so you also get the rural aspect from it. So I think in that sense, especially in Joburg, and I keep stressing in Joburg because unlike Cape Town, people from all over South Africa and all over Africa mainly come to Joburg. Therefore, you can fully say you have a fully representative combination of all these cultures and views. So therefore, I'd say, the culture that best represents South Africa is the Joburg cosmopolitan culture, because it's about vibrant people, happy people on the move, people who want to see themselves some way, people who appreciate each other, people who can see across racial lines, because for them that's not what it's about. It's about moving forward and developing themselves.
Have black people lost their identity in the West?
South Africans lost their identity.
Have South African people lost their identity in the West?
Well, in terms of South Africans losing their identity to the West, it's a bit of a yes and no thing, because I feel that to a certain degree, systematically and institutionally, we have lost our culture to a certain degree, not all the way though. Because of apartheid, because of colonialism, as Africans we were taught that our culture is less important than the Western culture. Therefore, as black Africans, as white Africans, we try so bloody hard to be Western. That's why we're so not in touch with our indigenous knowledge. That's why we've got all people who are sitting there basically being like proper libraries of hardcore indigenous knowledge, and we're not even aware of it. There's so much amazing stuff around us, indigenous stuff, that we're not aware of it because we're not acclimatized that way, we're not taught that way. We were taught that our culture is less important. So to that degree, yes, South Africans have lost their culture to Westerns. But then at the same time, with the Renaissance, the African Renaissance, as our beautiful president will say, we're starting to rediscover our culture. We're starting to, as speaking from a black African, South African's perspective, we're starting to say, but it's okay to be black and be Botswana. It's okay to be black and to be Ndebele. It's okay for me to go and slaughter a cow in respect for my ancestors. Because before we denied that right, that's why we did not take care of it. That's why we lost it. But now we're starting to rediscover it. So we've lost it, but we're starting to rediscover it.
Would you say that Africanization is equivalent to the African Renaissance or South African?
I think it's more of a South African Renaissance than an African Renaissance, because I think compared to other African countries, South Africa is moving much faster, and more in relatively speaking. And we are more focused on development. We're more focused on adapting to change. We worry about things like that. Whereas in other countries, it's still more of the nitty-gritty stuff. It's still more of an ethnical thing. You still have huge conflicts that really, really need hectic intervention before they can be solved. Before people can even worry about rediscovering themselves as Africans and reteaching their kids the African values. So I would say it's more of a South African thing right now. Hopefully, in Uganda, it's kind of like happening differently with the HIV/AIDS thing. But it's more, I would say, still more of a South African Renaissance, like really an African Renaissance.
How does it help you know other people's cultures?
Gee, for me, as a young black female South African who grew up in a rural area and then later on moved to the city of gold, it's ultra important. And also someone who's very passionate about transformation. For me, it's ultra important. It's like super important that I learn about other cultures, because I always say, like I said at the beginning, you need to be comfortable in your own skin, in your own self. So that learning about Hinduism or learning about Buddhism or about the monks is not such a big threat to you, because you are so comfortable in who you are. So it's absolutely important, because it's not only a personal enrichment, but it also makes it so much easier for you to relate to other people. Basically simple basic stuff, because you know more about Christianity or about Judaism or about Buddhism. It's not an issue for you when you see a Jewish person, or when you're in a Jewish area, or when you go to a Buddhist person, or when you go to a Hindu house, and then at 2, or to the Muslims, and then at 2 they start praying. It's not an issue, because you understand and you respect that. That's why it's important, because from that understanding we start respecting each other and start putting each other in little pigeonholes that we can say, yeah, well, he's this way, let's treat him this way. So it's absolutely important that we learn other people's cultures.
What culture do you think the colored people have in South Africa?
What culture do I think?
Colored people have in South Africa.
No, I can't answer that. Reserve that for the colored people.
What is a South African culture?
A South African culture. South African culture is a bit of a two-pronged thing in a sense that on one side we have this culture of giving. We still have the most beautiful hearts. We still, to a certain degree, we still have one of the core values of being African, Ubuntu. So that's what I love most about being an African. Anywhere in the world, we still have that the next person is my brother or the next person is my sister, period. Regardless of their color and whatever. And I think to a larger extent South Africans have that, and that makes a huge part of their culture. And the diversity issue as well. Because we are so many people, so many different little nations within one nation. One way or the other, we have learned to appreciate diversity. We are not really there yet, we're still getting there, but we're learning to do that. But then on the other side, we're getting a bit selfish to a certain degree, because you get people who are so focused on enriching themselves and not really helping others out. And I think that's where the clash comes, because as much as this beautiful culture of diversity and giving, we also have a culture of it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, and that's the end of it, and that's where the problem comes in.
So would you say capitalism could be the downfall?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily want to blame capitalism. Hey, somebody's gonna make money. But it's a matter of you really.
Okay, we take our own.
Alright. Would be like the fall of the culture of Ubuntu and things like that. It's more of a personal thing. Capitalism can help us a lot. If I have money, if I have the skills, if I have the connections, I can make things happen where I know things aren't happening. Because I have the money, because I have the influence, I can get some people who don't even live in this country to build a clinic for my people in the rural area. So it's not necessarily capitalism, it's more of a mindset, of people getting to that place where everything has to be theirs and they just basically forget about other people.
What does the currency, South African currency tell you about South Africa?
Well, the South African currency for me is vibrant and relatively young. It has that youthful spirit, because if you look at the money now, it's more about representing South Africa as it is now. On other notes, you've got mines. For instance, in this one, you've got our wild animals, and part of the big five and things like that. That's more about marketing South Africa to tourists, saying to people. So when people look at our money, already get an idea of what our country is about. And to me, that's a cool thing, because it's not just another bill, it's something that says something to me. As compared to old money, which had the beautiful Jan on it. Because this was just more of, now I would think this is just more of a capitalistic thing, you know, like he's the guy on top putting his head on the money, period. It really doesn't have any other value for me, you know what I'm saying? It's someone who comes from overseas, they look at it, oh, so who's this? Jan van Riebeck, they say. Oh, you know, he's one of the guys that first arrived in South Africa, but then that's pretty much it. Whereas this is like, okay, they've got this, they've got that, you know, there's shit happening in South Africa. That's what, like, currency says to me. I would say yes, interracial marriages do work in South Africa. It's just a matter of people's mindsets, really. I mean, if you love each other and everything, like obviously then the race thing is not an issue to the people involved in the relationship. It's just a matter of the people's mindsets around them. So yes, they do work. It's just a matter of people either refusing to acknowledge or refusing to accept them, or saying, what the hell, you know, just let it slide. So yes, they do work.
Should they be encouraged?
I would say yes, they should be encouraged. I mean, it is a fine cultural line, but then again, it's a matter of saying, well, I know who I am. I know my roots. You know your roots. So if we come together in a relationship setup, that doesn't necessarily mean, because relationships are not about one dominating the other. So if you're confident about who you are and you know where you come from, then when we get together, it shouldn't be an issue, because you'll still have your cultural values, you know. Yes, they might be slightly different, but if you look at the fundamental principles of all humanity and across all religions, it's all about loving the next person as your own brother or sister, respecting the next person. So your fundamental values are the same across all cultural barriers or lines. So it's basically about people, you know, saying, let's accept this or let's not accept this. And hell yeah, they should be encouraged. We need to see a real rainbow nation.
Can offspring of mixed races eradicate racism?
A child of a mixed couple, I think for the child, race will not be an issue. So in that sense, the child themselves might not necessarily be able to eradicate the racial crisis, but then they'll assist in building the mindset that race should not be an issue, because to them it's not an issue. You know what I'm saying? So like for them, it wouldn't be an issue. So they'll be part of that generation that doesn't see race an issue. But then at the same time, I feel sorry for the little bastards, because when you get out there, it's not necessarily like that. Because you will get people who will ostracize them, you will get people who will label them, and that can be like incredibly confusing for the child. Because then they're like, but I don't understand. So it's a good thing, because you'll have someone who doesn't really care about racial issues, which we need. But then at the same time, it can be a bit of a problem for them when they go into the real world.
And will they lose their identity?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, like I say, if two people from different cultures bring up a child together, it's a matter of everybody creates their own identity one way or the other. So it's just a matter of parents teaching the children what they feel are the right principles, and teaching them what they both, you know, value from their cultures, and creating one identity.
Do interracial marriages work? Zulu and Xhosa or Venda and Ndebele?
Yeah, well, intercultural marriages do work between like same racial groups but different cultures. Yes, they do it. It's just, again, I'm going to keep on referring to blame the system, refer to colonialism and racism. But the point is, because of that systematic division, you know, the Zulus were put as the Zulus, the homeland system. They were used, it was used to, you know, to divide black people or African people. So, you know, like your Afrikaans people would be your white Afrikaans people, Jewish, Greek, Portuguese. So that really made the divisions clear. And that's what most of the time actually hinders your intercultural relationships, because you still have most parents, older people, wouldn't accept intercultural marriages because that's the way they were brought up in. That, you know, stay within your own culture, period. Don't go into the other culture. But because because we're trying to create this whole new thing of people understanding and respecting other cultures. Hell yeah, let's encourage intercultural and interracial relationships, because that's the best way to learn more about the next race and about the next culture.
What about cultural differences in marriage?
Well, I mean, yeah, well, in some cultures people fight a lot, and then in some cultures they break plates when at a wedding. They do really funny things, but it's in terms of cultural differences or cultural clashes. It's just gonna be one of those things where the couple do what they feel is best for them as the individuals in the relationship. You know what I'm saying? Because it always comes down to that. Okay, so this is what my culture is and this one. I mean, if you can't reach a compromise, then damn, maybe you shouldn't be together in the first place. So it's really more about saying, okay, we have a bit of a difference here. How do we work this out as two people who love each other and want to make this work?
What is the set way of how marriage should work?
What is
The set way.
of how marriage should work? Oh no, you're asking me about marriage. You're the wrong person. Well, gee, I'm a young person who believes in almost everything being dynamic. You know, like you can change it whichever way you want to. So I wouldn't say there's a particularly set way that marriages should work. I think there are fundamental principles like respect for each other, like love. You know, but in terms of how a marriage should work, it's really a matter of how you as two people feel about each other and what works best for you. So if it's an intercultural relationship, it doesn't necessarily have to work according to one culture. It can be like, okay, but this works for us, so let's do it this way. Or no, this doesn't work, so let's change it and do it this way. Next.
Is there tolerance between different races?
Hypocrisy, darling, hypocrisy. You have no idea. Yes, there's tolerance. We put up with each other so gracefully. It's amazing. That's how we got so far. 10 years of democracy. Because everybody is like, yeah, well, it's fine. You're black and I'm white. You stay there, I'll stay here. Okay? No crossing each other's lines. And that's why it's so easy to make a very stupid racial comment and get people really boiled up. Because people still haven't really dealt with their own issues, really. So, yes, there's tolerance. We're basically just putting up with each other, but there's very few who make an effort to get to know people as individuals. People still see people in little boxes and little pigeonholes, and they treat them that way. You know, well, you're black and Zulu, so obviously you like fighting, so therefore I should become defensive when I approach you, kind of thing. That kind of thing, you know what I'm saying? But there isn't really that thing saying, okay, well, you're Simpiwe. What are you about? Tell me about you. You know, what makes Simpiwe tick as an individual? And for me, that's the goal of everything. If people start treating each other that way, looking at each other as individuals, then I start to understand you. And from that basic understanding, which we really, really need, there comes the fundamental respect. It will just go across everything. Because I understand where you come from. Why do you do things this way? Why do you speak this way? Why do you walk that way? You know, maybe there's a whole big reason behind it and I just don't get it, but because it's just so easy to put you in a little box and say, yeah, well, he's trying to do this or he's trying to do this. Oh my God, he's black, clutch your back. He's gonna take your back or something like that. But because we don't really get to know people as individuals, we start just tolerating. It's like, okay, you sit on your other side of the fence and I sit on my other side of the fence. So there's tolerance, but there's still no proper understanding and respect of individuals.